The atmosphere in the capital is tense, unlike anything observed in recent years. Reports arriving in these hours indicate that the center of power is operating under conditions of extreme pressure, as military operations in the field appear to be unraveling critical positions across multiple fronts. Official statements maintain that operations are proceeding according to plan, but sources close to the military command suggest a dramatically different reality: rapid withdrawals, fractured communications, and unprecedented disruptions in supply lines. The sense of urgency is palpable, even as public messaging attempts to convey stability. By midday, intelligence collected from a combination of satellite monitoring, field reports, and internal communications indicates that the leadership has relocated to a secure underground facility, a move characterized by insiders as precautionary but extraordinary in scale. The timing and nature of this relocation signal that the command structure perceives immediate threats not only to operational capabilities but to the continuity of governance itself. Observers note that access to this facility is tightly controlled, with multiple security layers activated, creating an environment where even senior advisors are only partially aware of the full scope of decisions being made. Meanwhile, the battlefield situation suggests that Ukrainian forces have executed maneuvers that exceed prior assessments, penetrating previously secure regions and disrupting lines of coordination. Analysts in multiple capitals indicate that these advances are not isolated tactical successes but part of a systematic strategy to dismantle key nodes of control. According to confidential reports, multiple units tasked with logistical support and communication have been neutralized or cut off, leaving operational leaders to improvise under severe constraints. In diplomatic and intelligence circles, the implications of these developments are being assessed with unprecedented scrutiny. Sources note that decisions being made in the underground command center are informed by real-time data from compromised networks, yet the reliability of these communications is under question. Observers emphasize that in such conditions, rapid adjustments are essential, and each movement carries risks that could exacerbate vulnerabilities already exposed on the front lines. The contrast between public statements and internal assessments is striking. Official channels report measured progress, asserting that forces remain in position and that contingency plans are actively managed. Yet analysts monitoring multiple information streams highlight that these claims do not align with observed movements on the ground, suggesting a widening gap between narrative and reality. Even minor discrepancies, delays in reporting, inconsistencies in troop locations, and sudden strategic shifts are being interpreted as indicators of mounting pressure and instability. By this point in the day, it is evident that the operational tempo has forced extraordinary measures. High-level coordination is occurring in a secure, subterranean environment, while field commanders face rapidly evolving threats and the erosion of established command protocols. Experts note that such a scenario, where leadership is physically isolated from the theater of operations, has significant implications for decision-making, morale, and the capacity to respond effectively to further advances. At first glance, the city maintains the appearance of normality, traffic moves, public spaces operate under routine surveillance, and state media continues its carefully controlled broadcasts. But beneath this veneer, sources report an unprecedented level of internal movement, emergency meetings, and classified communications, all pointing to a command structure under siege. Analysts caution that these developments are not simply symbolic. They reflect a substantive recalibration of strategic priorities in real time, a response to pressure that is as operational as it is psychological. Possibly, it is worth observing how these developments unfold in the hours ahead. Some sources suggest that what is occurring now may redefine the strategic posture of the state and the perception of authority within both domestic and international spheres. But even as the public perceives routine continuity, the reality beneath the surface suggests that the day's events are accelerating a sequence of unprecedented and potentially transformative decisions. By midday, a clearer picture of the operational collapse began to emerge from multiple intelligence sources. Reports indicate that Ukrainian forces are not only advancing along previously contested fronts but have successfully disrupted key logistical hubs, leaving supply lines fragmented and undermining coordination between regional commands. Analysts in military think tanks describe the situation as a cascade failure. Once critical junctions of communication and transport have been neutralized, creating ripple effects that jeopardize broader operational integrity. Official channels continue to describe movements as adjustments or redeployments, but the evidence collected on the ground paints a starkly different reality. Sources close to the command structure note that contingency protocols have been activated to preserve control, yet these measures highlight the severity of the disruptions. Specialized units tasked with maintaining command continuity have been repositioned, and senior officials are reportedly working from secure underground facilities to manage the rapidly deteriorating front lines. Analysts emphasize that while these steps are defensive in nature, the concentration of leadership in subterranean locations signals an extraordinary level of concern regarding both the operational situation and the broader perception of authority. Intelligence gathered from satellite feeds and intercepted communications indicates that Ukrainian forces are exploiting gaps in territorial control with precision, targeting nodes that were considered resilient under standard assessments. Multiple sources report that isolated units have been encircled or forced to retreat under pressure, further eroding the operational coherence of the armed forces. Observers highlight that such maneuvers are consistent with a strategy designed to disrupt command and control structures, creating both material and psychological pressure on the central leadership. The juxtaposition of official statements and real-time intelligence is particularly striking. Public messaging emphasizes stability and continuity, asserting that defensive lines remain robust and that strategic objectives are being met. Yet confidential reports reveal that coordination challenges are escalating, with local commanders improvising under conditions of uncertainty and diminished resources. Analysts note that even minor failures in these circumstances can propagate quickly, amplifying operational instability and undermining morale across multiple units. In addition to military setbacks, sources indicate that internal security mechanisms are operating under heightened alert. Protective measures surrounding leadership compounds have been intensified, and access to critical decision-making nodes is restricted. Analysts interpret this dual response, heightened security and focused command operations, as indicative of a recognition that the strategic stakes of the day extend beyond the battlefield, encompassing the very continuity of governance and centralized authority. Throughout these hours, signals from multiple fronts indicate that the pace of operations has accelerated, and the ability to respond effectively is constrained by the fragmentation of command channels. Analysts emphasize that the leadership's physical isolation, combined with rapid territorial losses, creates a feedback loop. Constrained information flows, limited mobility, and the pressure of rapid decision-making intensify both operational and psychological stress across the command hierarchy. Observers further note that these conditions are likely to influence strategic choices in real time, compelling decision-makers to weigh immediate tactical responses against longer-term consequences. The interplay of disrupted logistics, frontline advances, and constrained leadership underscores the extraordinary complexity of the current situation, one that challenges conventional models of command and highlights the fragility of operational cohesion under extreme pressure. By this point in the day, the contrast between the controlled narrative presented to the public and the volatile reality on the ground is stark. Analysts caution that the unfolding developments are unlikely to stabilize quickly, and that the trajectory of the conflict may shift dramatically depending on the capacity of leadership to adapt under pressure. However, even as the day progresses, it is clear that the operational and strategic situation remains in flux, with each movement, decision, and communication carrying consequences far beyond the immediate battlefield. As the day unfolded further, an unmistakable intensification of internal crisis became apparent. Sources close to the command structure report that the leadership is operating under unprecedented constraints, relying heavily on secure underground facilities to maintain control over the rapidly deteriorating situation. Communications with regional units are reported to be sporadic and increasingly dependent on improvised channels, highlighting a severe strain on traditional command networks. Analysts suggest that this level of operational disruption is extraordinary, signaling not only tactical setbacks but a profound challenge to centralized authority. Field reports indicate that Ukrainian forces are executing coordinated maneuvers that exploit the fragmentation of command and the vulnerability of key logistical hubs. Multiple sources confirm that critical transport corridors have been severed, forcing units to retreat under duress or risk encirclement. The pattern observed suggests not isolated tactical victories but a systematic campaign to dismantle structural cohesion, undermining both morale and operational capacity. In expert circles, the consensus is that these advances are reshaping the operational landscape faster than anticipated by even the most conservative assessments. Inside the leadership's subterranean command center, the pace of decision-making has accelerated. Confidential sources indicate that strategic priorities are being recalibrated continuously, with advisors providing real-time assessments of vulnerabilities, potential countermeasures, and the cascading effects of battlefield developments. Analysts note that in such a high-pressure environment, even minor misjudgments in timing, communication, or resource allocation could have disproportionate consequences, amplifying both operational and psychological stress across the chain of command. Observers report that the leadership is carefully monitoring not only military developments but also signals from domestic and international audiences. Protective measures around key facilities have been heightened, while strategic communications are being tightly controlled to project stability. Yet insiders emphasize that the perception of control is increasingly fragile, and the divergence between public messaging and internal realities is widening. Analysts stress that in high-stakes scenarios, the management of perception is as critical as the management of operations, and today's developments exemplify the precarious balance between the two. Multiple confidential reports suggest that contingency options are under active consideration, ranging from tactical withdrawals to more extensive operational realignments. Experts indicate that these measures are being evaluated not merely for immediate battlefield outcomes but for their broader impact on strategic credibility, internal cohesion, and the leadership's ability to maintain authority. Sources emphasize that the day's proceedings are shaping the framework for decisions that may carry consequences far beyond the current operational theater. In parallel, intelligence from Ukrainian and allied sources confirms that the tempo of advances continues to challenge command stability. Units previously considered secure are now under pressure, and lines of communication have been disrupted in ways that prevent coordinated responses. Analysts note that the leadership's reliance on subterranean command operations, while necessary for protection and continuity, inherently limits situational awareness, compounding the challenges of decision-making under pressure. At this stage, the contrast between the controlled narrative presented through official channels and the volatile operational reality is stark. Observers emphasize that the day's events are not simply about territorial shifts but about the erosion of structural cohesion and the redefinition of operational capability. The leadership's physical isolation, combined with rapid advances on multiple fronts, has created a feedback loop of stress, urgency, and improvisation, one that will shape the trajectory of the conflict in hours to come. Possibly, it is worth following the sequence of developments closely, as some analysts suggest that today marks a pivotal point in the recalibration of power and strategy. Every movement, communication, and decision carries amplified significance, illustrating the fragility and complexity of command under extreme pressure. However, even with this emerging clarity, much remains concealed beneath layers of secrecy, strategy, and improvisation, leaving the day's ultimate outcome unresolved and fraught with uncertainty. As the day progressed toward its midpoint, the scale of disruption intensified, revealing a complex interplay between operational collapse and strategic recalibration. Sources indicate that Ukrainian forces are continuing their rapid advances, systematically targeting nodes of command, supply, and infrastructure. Reports describe previously secure regions falling under pressure, forcing local commanders into reactive maneuvers that further fragment cohesion. Analysts note that these developments are not isolated tactical successes but part of a deliberate campaign to undermine centralized control, amplifying the psychological and operational strain on leadership. Inside the subterranean command centers, decision-making is reported to be operating under extreme constraints. Sources emphasize that communications with frontline units remain intermittent, forcing leadership to rely on fragmented intelligence and real-time assessments filtered through multiple intermediary channels. Observers highlight that this creates a precarious environment. Each decision carries immediate battlefield consequences while also influencing the broader perception of authority, both domestically and internationally. Meanwhile, the pattern of Ukrainian operations demonstrates a high level of coordination and precision. Units are reportedly exploiting gaps created by disrupted communications, seizing critical junctions, and accelerating advances along multiple axes simultaneously. Analysts in military think tanks emphasize that these maneuvers are strategically designed to compound the effects of fragmented command, creating cascading failures in logistics, morale, and operational coherence. The speed and scale of these actions appear to have outpaced contingency measures, forcing leadership to improvise under mounting pressure. Confidential reports indicate that protective measures around key facilities have been intensified. Access is strictly controlled, and advisors operate under continuous situational updates to monitor both immediate threats and potential cascading failures. Experts interpret this level of internal security and operational focus as indicative of a recognition that today's developments could compromise not only field operations but the continuity of centralized governance. The dual pressures of battlefield setbacks and the necessity of maintaining authority have created a feedback loop of urgency, improvisation, and stress. Observers also report a surge in rapid, informal decision-making within leadership circles. Contingency options are being considered and recalibrated in real time, ranging from tactical withdrawals to broader operational realignments. Analysts note that each adjustment is weighed for both immediate military impact and longer-term strategic credibility. Even minor shifts in resource allocation, timing of orders, or communication with units can have outsized effects, amplifying the complexity of real-time command. Public messaging continues to project stability and measured progress, yet insiders confirm that the operational reality diverges sharply. Units previously considered secure are now vulnerable, supply lines are compromised, and command cohesion is under severe stress. Analysts caution that these conditions create a volatile environment where the margin for error is minimal and the consequences of miscalculation are amplified across multiple levels of the military hierarchy. By this point in the day, it is evident that the situation has reached a critical inflection. The leadership's reliance on underground command, while necessary for continuity and protection, inherently limits real-time situational awareness, creating vulnerabilities that adversaries are exploiting systematically. Observers note that this convergence of operational, psychological, and strategic pressures marks a pivotal phase, one in which every decision has immediate and potentially far-reaching ramifications. The day's developments underscore the growing disparity between the controlled narrative projected to the public and the volatile reality on the ground. Analysts emphasize that the unfolding crisis is not simply a matter of territorial adjustments but represents a deeper challenge to command structure, operational cohesion, and strategic authority. Every movement, communication, and decision now carries amplified significance, revealing a leadership under siege. However, even amid these pressures, much remains obscured beneath layers of strategy, secrecy, and improvisation, leaving the trajectory of the day's events unresolved and the ultimate outcome uncertain. As the day approached its midpoint, a tentative calm seemed to settle over the command centers, yet beneath the surface, tensions remained acute. Sources indicate that while visible operations show limited movement, the internal environment is marked by continuous assessment and recalibration. Leadership continues to operate from secure underground facilities, coordinating through constrained channels, while advisors manage fragmented intelligence from multiple fronts. Analysts emphasize that the day's strategic significance lies less in visible troop movements than in the subtle adjustments of command, signaling, and authority that are shaping the course of events. Observers report that Ukrainian forces continue to press their advantage, exploiting gaps in command and communication to consolidate gains and disrupt operational cohesion. Multiple confidential sources suggest that local commanders are improvising under extreme constraints, attempting to stabilize positions while coordinating with increasingly isolated central command. Experts note that this simultaneous pressure on field units and leadership produces a compounded effect. Operational setbacks feed into strategic stress, and vice versa, creating a cycle of heightened urgency and decision-making under uncertainty. Within the subterranean command environment, decisions are being evaluated not only for immediate tactical impact but also for longer-term consequences on authority, credibility, and internal cohesion. Analysts highlight that the careful sequencing of orders, selective disclosure of information, and controlled messaging are central to maintaining operational control amid rapidly evolving conditions. Even minor miscalculations could have disproportionate effects, influencing both battlefield outcomes and the perception of stability among domestic and international observers. Meanwhile, signals from multiple intelligence streams suggest that contingency measures are being refined continuously. Leadership is reportedly assessing tactical withdrawals, reallocation of resources, and alternative communication pathways to mitigate the effects of disrupted command networks. Observers emphasize that these actions, while precautionary, underscore the severity of the operational situation and the fragility of the current command structure. The day has demonstrated that maintaining authority under such conditions is as much about perception and strategic signaling as it is about direct operational control. Public messaging continues to present an image of routine operations, emphasizing continuity and control, yet confidential reports confirm that the reality is far more complex. Analysts note that the leadership's isolation, combined with ongoing territorial losses, creates a feedback loop of pressure and improvisation that challenges conventional command models. Every decision, gesture, and communication is calibrated to manage both internal coordination and external perception, reflecting the extraordinary stakes of the day's developments. By this stage, the unfolding events reveal a critical juncture. The leadership's physical separation from the theater of operations, coupled with rapidly advancing adversary forces, has created a situation in which operational, psychological, and strategic pressures converge. Analysts stress that the day's developments have reshaped the operational landscape, tested the resilience of command structures, and highlighted the vulnerability of authority under extreme stress. Even as visible activity appears subdued, the true significance of today's events lies in the layered adjustments of strategy, signaling, and command coordination. Observers emphasize that these subtle maneuvers, largely hidden from public view, will influence both the immediate trajectory of the conflict and the broader perception of leadership capacity. The day illustrates that crises of authority can unfold quietly yet carry consequences that extend far beyond what is immediately observable. On the surface, the operational picture may suggest a degree of stabilization, but behind the controlled facade, decisions continue to be made under duress, and the effects of territorial disruption, fragmented command, and strategic pressure are still unfolding. At first glance, the situation might appear contained. Yet those closely monitoring signals from the command structure understand that the ramifications of today's developments will continue to resonate, shaping the dynamics of control, authority, and operational cohesion in ways that are not yet fully apparent. Possibly, it is worth observing the subsequent flow of events carefully, as the interplay between strategic adaptation, operational constraint, and the perception of authority may define the next phase of the conflict. The day closes not with resolution but with a persistent awareness that the consequences of the unfolding pressures will extend far beyond what has already been observed, leaving the trajectory of the crisis poised on a knife edge.